Alright, guys, I'm going to read you the story, Attack of the Teachers, which I have in quotes, based on a true story, in parentheses, sort of. Dated March 22nd, 2004. Okay, everyone, today we're going to present our personal novel project, Mrs. Adams said. Everyone quickly took out their projects, hoping that everyone brought theirs so the teacher wouldn't get mad. Every student had theirs, except Stephen? Wait, what? I don't know if this is based on you or if it's just a generic name.
I'm probably the main character.
I never had Miss Adams. That's not a real teacher.
I never had Miss Adams either.
What?
Just read it.
Okay, yeah, you're the star.
Yeah.
I guess. Everyone had theirs except for Stephen. Oh man, Steve thought, I left mine at home. Mrs. Adams was walking around the class to inspect their project with a straight face, as opposed to a not-so-straight face. Then she came across Stephen's desk. Stephen, what is your project? She asked. I think I left it at home, Stephen replied in a cracked voice. I don't know. Mrs. Adams' face began to get red. The class knew what was coming, C-O-M-M-I-N-G, and immediately left the room. Why did you forget it? She questioned. He tried to reply. This class is for gifted students only, she started yelling, picking up a handful of pencils. Oh, God!
Pencils that you repaired.
No, wait, it gets worse.
Okay.
Picking up a handful of pencils. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't good enough. And with that, she hurled the pencil straight at Stephen. Stephen, thinking fast, ducked under the desk as the pencils whizzed overhead. Can't I just take an unprepared? He tried to reason. No, she shot back and clutched her telephone, pulled the cord out of it, and threw it at Stephen. Stephen turned the desk 90 degrees so that the surface was facing Mrs. Adams. The telephone slammed into it, and parts of the receiver shot up in the air. It's not a big deal. I'll bring it tomorrow, he explained. The due date was today, she thundered, and taped her calendar to a student desk. What? And taped her calendar to a student desk. Stephen knew it was coming and began to run out of his little bunker. Mrs. Adams threw the desk with all of her might at him. I don't know why he had to tape the calendar to it, but it happened. It narrowly missed him, but it crashed through the wall, creating a big hole between the two classrooms. The teacher next to her peered into that hole and asked, Mrs. Adams, what are you doing?
Well, her name is Mrs. Siegfried.
Wait, no, it isn't.
The teacher next to
the teacher next to her, Mrs. Siegfried. Peered into that hole and asked, Mrs. Adams, what are you doing? I'm, redecorating, Mrs. Adams replied through the hole. Stephen, thinking fast, ran through the door, but he wasn't fast enough for Mrs. Adams, who grabbed her office chair at her desk and chucked it at him. Stephen ducked as the chair flew overhead, turning her door and the door across the hall into hundreds of splinters. Mrs. Johnson, the teacher across the hall, silenced her class from the screaming when her door exploded into splinters. Mrs. Johnson walked to the hole in the door. Apparently she didn't open the door. She went through the hole in the door and went up to Mrs. Adams. You'd better have a good reason for frightening my kids and destroying my door. Well, I do. This boy forgot to bring in his projects. Oh, she replied, walking into her class and coming out with a large stack of papers. You get a 0! Mrs. Johnson yelled and flung one of the papers towards Steve. He ran and jumped across the class, dodging 0 slips. Steve sprinted towards his desk, grabbed his lunchbox, and took out a bottle of water. As the unprepared slips came toward him, he squirted them with his water bottle, and they dropped out of the air. Each slip that was thrown was shot out of the sky until the water bottle was empty. 2 on 1, he thought. That's not fair. Wait. Stephen just hatched the plan and was about to put it into action until a flying textbook hit his leg. He yelped in pain and fell down, realizing that he was an easy target. He got up and ran to the fire extinguisher. Stephen looked at the instructions with a puzzled look. Then he just slammed it on the ground, and a thick cloud of its contents filled the room. Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Johnson both coughed, but didn't see him leave. He ran out back. He ran out the back school door. Maybe if I bring my project there, they'll stop this madness. Stephen was lucky in the fact that he was only a block from school. He unlocked his door, grabbed his project, and ran back to school, forgetting to lock his door. I'm hoping you get broken into, but I don't think that happens. He ran back into Mrs. Adams' class, panting. "Here it is," he yelled out of breath, holding up his project. She looked at it and wrote 87 on his grade paper. That's so anticlimactic. The students came back into Mrs. Adams' room, hearing silence, and they organized the room. Class went normally until 8th mod, where Stephen heard the scuttling of many students and Mrs. Adams yelling, "Where is your signed test?" The end, for now. That sucked.
It's based off a true story.
Based off a sort of true story.
I was